Due to the fact that you have to remember this bank is 1/20th the size of a Bank of America. And yes, you're seeing it up 6% today off of that net income. And net income doubled. That was very impressive to see. But it's still down 36% in the last 6 months. So I think you have to understand a stock like this, Kelly, high risk, high reward. I do see on the chart it's broken. It's under its 50-day, under its 200-day moving average. So it looks like there's actually a ton of support in the 90s. I know that's about $25 lower. But M&T, if you want to get into a name like this, it is oversold. But I think there's more room to come down because you're going to see more and more folks move their money away from a regional bank and prefer a big wirehouse where there's just more perceived safety.
All right, that brings us to Bank of America, which reports in the morning. They're largely expected to be another big beneficiary of deposit flight, perhaps to a lesser extent. Shares up 2% today and only down 9% so far this year, Dom. What are the keys here?
I mean, so it's very much about beyond the headline numbers, right? We'll watch for the revenues, we'll watch for the earnings per share. But for Bank of America, it's considered one of those money center or, so to speak, wirehouse banks that Jeff kind of just alluded to. It has a banking relationship with half of America.
Wow.
With regard to either mortgages, homes, credit cards, outright retail banking services. So it touches a lot of people. It's the reason why it's seen as that bellwether. What you're going to watch, though, for B of A, though, is something that we haven't talked about as much because we're so focused on deposits. It is actually about sales and trading and capital markets operations. B of A has a decent amount in terms of those. And so that sales and trading is going to be big. It's also about whether or not consumers are shifting some of that behavior. Are they using different products? And what about B of A's credit loss provisions? That's going to be big. It's an indicator because they have so many banking relationships.
Yeah.
Are they going to up it? By how much? And is that the read on the future economy? That's going to be key.
And compared with J.P. Morgan, Jeff, JP's seen as a little bit more, kind of like Dom was saying, focused on business, perhaps more exposure there, while as Bank of America maybe arguably more consumer-facing. Do you like the stock here?
I do like the stock here, and I have a very emotional attachment to this stock. One of our biggest family offices owned the stock for a long time. So it's hard to believe, Kelly, but just last February in 2022, the stock kissed $50. Here we are down $30. It seems to be building a base, so I think you have the ability to be a buyer here. Talk about the dividend growth. It's a 3% dividend. It's been 5 quarters, and it continues to grow its dividend by 15%. That's actually 9 consecutive years you've seen dividend growth. So this is the second largest bank. I feel comfort buying it here. You have to understand it's in a range, so $33 looks like a short-term target, but I think they're going to knock the cover off the ball in earnings, just like J.P. Morgan did last Friday.
All right, so, I mean, come on, 30 to 33. We'll take
10%,
it.
Kelly. Come on, 10%. Are we sneezing at 10% now, Dom?
No, we're not. No, we're not.
Okay,
Let's turn finally to Goldman Sachs and really dig into capital markets, Dom. They're only down 1% this year with today's gain. And remember, last quarter was when Goldman reported its biggest earnings miss in a decade with that revenue drop. How are they going to manage now?
So this is the interest. It's such a weird, bizarro type world because for B of A, I'm not focused as much on deposits and retail banking. I'm focused more on capital markets. For Goldman Sachs, I'm not going to be as focused on capital markets because their FIC franchise, fixed income currency commodities, always decently strong there. There are some trading volatility issues that are going to help drive trading and sales revenues there. I'm focused more on the consumer banking side of things, which is what drove a lot of the downside move in the last quarter. The Marcus division, the one formerly known as, maybe they're not using it as much anymore, but the consumer lending and banking business, it was a high-profile mea culpa from David Solomon, the CEO, and the other folks at Goldman Sachs. What do they do with it? How does it look right now? And by the way, this is all coming out on the same day that Apple just announced that it's got this new savings account feature tied to the Apple Card, which is all tied to guess who? Goldman Sachs.
But
by the time
also,
it's done.
Apple's offering more than 4%. And Goldman, too, I mean, their whole model, it's ironic that they ran into these problems just before people started really searching out the highest deposit, highest earning places for their cash.
Well, and so if you want to look at it on that front, for B of A and for Goldman both, these are mega banks, and they're for their consumer banking franchises will be competing with everybody else for deposits at this point. So that dynamic is going to be something to watch for Goldman. Ironically enough, because we never really talk about Goldman from a consumer banking standpoint.
Down is up is down. Kilberg, what would you do with Goldman here?
Well, I want to be a buyer, but I want to be a buyer in a very nuanced way. I'm going to go back to my days in the pit. I want to be a buyer here on a stop. And what does that mean, Kelly? Well, right now, if you look at the 50-day and 200-day moving average, it's very coiled. So trading at $339, That 50-day moving average is just at 342. So I want to be a buyer if it goes up there, because I think the relative strength and momentum will move the stock higher. But to Dom's point, they're absolutely right when they retired that Marcus platform. So they're going to refocus and talk about the asset and wealth management piece. We don't talk enough about that. That's 30% of Goldman Sachs' total revenue. So I think the stock moves higher, but I don't want to be a buyer here at 339, 340. I want to be a buyer at 342.